Okay, welcome to the second online lesson for the remainder of Unit 3. This is actually the end of Unit 3, so I'm going to come up with something for you guys to do. I'm just not sure yet what that's going to be. It'll get posted though, don't worry. Okay, so the reason why we learn how to solve linear equations really is so that we can solve problems. And there's all sorts of different problems that we have to solve. We've already done some problems where, say, I tell you what the perimeter is, and so then you have to figure out what, say, the length is or something. There's just all sorts of problems that you can solve. And what you need to do, though, is that you have to create the equation to solve that problem. And since you only know how to solve equations that have one variable in them, like actually solve them and come up with a number, then that means that we have to create equations that only have one variable in them. So there are steps that you go through to create your equations. Now I'll let you stop the video and you can just read through all of these steps. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next example. So you can stop the video, read these on your lesson. If you have your lesson in front of you, your blank lesson in front of you. But I'm just going to go through it and solve a few problems. Okay, so let's go to the first one. Find 3 consecutive odd integers so that the sum of the first multiplied by 3, the second is decreased by 5, and the third doubled is 95. So, sum, that means you're adding things together. And you're adding these 3 things together. You're adding the first number multiplied by 3, the second number decreased by 5, and the third number doubled. So we've got the first odd integer times 3 plus the second odd integer decreased by 5 plus the third odd integer doubled, so times 2. All of that added together is equal to 95. So the first step is to basically really just understand what the problem is asking you to do. So now we need to come up with one variable, and that one variable is going to represent something that we're trying to find. We are trying to find 3 consecutive odd integers. So for example, if the first, now they have to be odd, so if the first odd integer was, say, 5, then the second odd integer would have to be 7, and then the third would have to be 9 because they are consecutive. And the word consecutive means in order or in a row. So if the first odd integer was, let's say, negative 15, then the second odd integer would have to be negative 13, and the third odd integer would have to be negative 11. Now, right now, we don't know what the answer to this question is, so I don't know if any of these examples are correct. So what we're going to do, the first step, after you understand what the question is asking you to find, the first step is to introduce a variable. So introduce a variable to represent one of the unknowns. So in this case, I'm going to say let's let x be the first odd integer. Okay, so now we have to think, well, if x is the first odd integer, how do we get to the second odd integer from the first? Well, to get from 5 to 7, we have to add 2. To get from negative 15 to negative 13, we have to add 2. So it looks like to get from one odd integer to the next odd integer, we have to add 2. So therefore, x plus 2 is the second odd integer. And then how do we get to the next odd integer? Well, starting with 5, to get up to 9, we have to add 4. Or to get from negative 15 to negative 11, we have to add 4. Everything else that you express has to be expressed in terms of the initial variable. So every other unknown, remember we have 3 unknowns to find. We have the first odd integer, the second odd integer, and the third odd integer. So x is going to be the first, x plus 2 is going to be the second, and x plus 4 is the third odd integer. Now what we want to do is we want to make an equation. So going back to this equation here, where we were just trying to understand what the question was asking us to do, we have to take the first odd integer and multiply it by 3. Well, the first odd integer is x, so multiplying that by 3 gives us 3x. Plus, then we have to take the second odd integer and we have to decrease it by 5. Well, the second odd integer is x plus 2, so x plus 2 now needs to be decreased by 5. And then we have to take the third odd integer and multiply it by 2. Well, the third odd integer is x plus 4, so we're going to add 2 times that. You must put brackets around the x plus 4 because we're doubling the whole thing. We're not just doubling the x and we're not just doubling the 4. We're doubling the x and the 4. All of that put together has to equal 95. And now we have an equation that we have to solve. So we're going to expand. The first step is expanding this bracket. So we've got 3x plus x plus 2 minus 5 plus 2 times x is 2x and 2 times 4 is 8. And that has to equal 95. Now we want to get all of our x's on the left-hand side, if you remember from, a month ago. And then all of our non-x's on the right-hand side. So we've got 3x on the left, an x on the left, a 2x on the left. And then this 2 needs to go over to the other side. That's a minus 2. This minus 5 needs to go to the other side. That's a plus 5. And this 8 needs to go to the other side. That's a minus 8. So 3x plus 1x plus 2x, that's a total of 6 x's. 95 minus 2 is 93. Add 5 to that, that gives you 98. And then subtract 8 gives us 90. Divide both sides by 6, and x equals 15. Now remember, if we go back, x represents the first odd integer. So therefore, the integers are 15. Then the next one would be x plus 2, which is 17. And then the next one would be x plus 4, or 15 plus 4, which would be 19. And we're done. Okay, so step 1, introduce a variable to represent one of your unknowns. Step 2, express all the other unknown things that you have in terms of that variable. Step 3, make an equation. And then step 4 is solve. So step 3 is an equation. Step 4 is solve. And then finally, step 5 is make a statement that answers the question. Okay, there are questions like this in your homework. Follow this example as you go through, and I'm going to stop this video here, and I'm going to do the next one on another video.